Hello, colleagues. Welcome to week 2 of our learning together. The first thing I want to talk to you today about is engagement. And so we know how challenging writing is. We know how difficult it is to generate topics and to revise and to edit and to really be part of that process. And so we really have to motivate our learners and think about engagement all the time, because compliance, just because they're engaging and turning in the assignments, doesn't mean that students are engaged and want to engage in the writing process. So one strategy that we can try is a writer's notebook. So I've been asking you to engage yourself as a writer and live a writerly life by having a writer's notebook. And really, a writer's notebook evolves over time. So our beginning writers, our kindergartners, really they're drawing pictures. They might be writing down one or two things that they find to be important, or drawing in their heart, right? Really trying to engage them to notice and really transfer meaning so that others will be impacted by their writing or voice. And a writer's notebook is a place where once our writers are able to engage in print or have drawings that illustrate meaning, that they can engage with others to be able to transfer that meaning. And so I captured this quote: a writer's notebook leads a person to put insights, observations, quotes, and anecdotes onto a page long before the writer has chosen a topic. Sometimes we'll ask our writers to really think about things that are important to them. And so I have a couple of writer's notebooks that I want to share with you today. And so one way we can think of engaging our writers is through basically capturing some pictures. And so Ralph Fletcher, he just put out a new textbook that I want to share with you called Focus Lessons. And so he talks about in this text, really when we have our phones or cameras with us so many times, and really how sort of capturing that moment with a picture really can prompt us to be able to think of writing ideas and really engage us, so that some writers who feel maybe not so confident with drawing their pictures, they can actually take pictures and be able to engage, capturing and motivating them to write more about those ideas as they move forward. But this particular text, obviously, Ralph Fletcher enjoys photographing nature, and he lives in New Hampshire, and this text is full of interesting ideas and ways to engage our writers. So if we think about this particular writer, we could think about some interesting conversations we could have with that writer about a time when, obviously, this roller coaster ride with some of his friends was really important, really fun. Even it looks like some type of fun Hawaiian pool party, or, even just a narrative writing for a time when. And really sort of getting that writer to orally rehearse or sort of flash draft their ideas in talk before they engage in actually putting that pen to paper. So even using their hand as a graphic organizer, sort of thinking of that time when, right? So what was the setting like? What was the, who was there with you? Talk about the beginning, middle, and end of the story, and really orally rehearse that story as you're engaging as a writer. So as you're having those writing conferences and engaging writers to that storytelling piece. So if we think about the structure of our classrooms or the structure of our online learning platforms, we really want to think of that conversation as really being purposeful as we're engaging students to storytell. We know that they have many stories that they like to tell us, especially on Monday mornings, and really want to tell us about their lives and share those personal pieces. So our relationships with them and getting them to engage with their personal lives and really stopping to notice is critically important. So I'm just going to take a quick walk through this writer's notebook. So it looks like they have visited nature's classroom. They might have some ideas they want to write about. They might pick one. They might engage with a partner or you, storytelling or rehearsing a piece before they're actually flash drafting and writing to really build that writing stamina. So you can use notebooks in so many different ways. Many authors have produced different textbooks. I'll just grab one other textbook. Again, Ralph Fletcher, A Writer's Notebook, Unlocking the Writer in You. Just so many strategies that we can think about to really produce quality seed ideas for students and really getting them to be engaged and excited about that process. But the more we're excited about the process, the more they're excited about that process. And so you'll notice that they can decorate their writer's notebook or draw pictures or write about things that are in, collect ideas that are important to them and constantly change those pictures or ideas or adding inside this writer's notebook so that it becomes their own. So many students will just sort of flash draft their ideas. They might find something interesting they want to tell more about. And so it's up to us to really think about ways that to inspire writers to want to write. And so even as readers, really getting them to put that pen to paper as they're beginning to collect ideas and think and really notice as readers those ideas that inspire them or they make connections to. So student notebooks are such a critical piece. They can be digital, they can be narrative, they can be a folder where they just sort of continually add things depending on the structure that you choose. But this is a strategy that we really want to think deeply about as we're trying to get our writers motivated. I've seen some of our youngest learners have a little tiny pocket notebook that they sometimes keep in their pocket or their back pocket and they bring out to recess. And so when they come back in from recess, they're really ready to share something that happened. And this can be brief, 1 or 2 minutes, so that writers really feel as though we're an audience and we're listening and we're ready to listen to their stories. So our focus today is on thinking about narrative, which can take the form of storytelling, which so many of our young learners are really inspired by. The next thing I'd like to talk to you about today is really thinking through process versus product in our writing instruction. And so many times we can be so engulfed in trying to get the student to create a great product. And sometimes we get lost in thinking about that product and that product conversation. And really our goal is to think about the process of writing. So not just the process steps of writing process, but the actual process itself. So in many of the supportive texts, you'll notice that particularly in the Writing Strategies text by Jennifer Saravallo, she really focuses us on thinking through the actual process of writing strategy that can really improve the quality or the product, but that process step so that it can transfer to any writing moving forward. So we want to think deeply about what are those steps and what does it take to get that genre better rather than that product itself. In thinking through process versus product, we can just even for our youngest writers, even something as simple as drawing pictures, which is the beginning stages of writing, for drawing pictures for meaning to really transfer to their audience. So this lesson language sounds so much different than, can you add details to your picture? So that sounds so much different. So the word details to our students really doesn't mean to them what it does to us. And so we want to be explicit and clear as we're providing instruction for them, that we really think through those steps and the metacognitive process that it takes to get them to do a skill better through that strategy instruction, getting them to know how to do something. So in each conversation that we have with students, we really want to think about getting them to know how to engage in doing something better. So if we think about this lesson language, we can think about how clear we could be in our demonstration, and then getting them using the prompts and getting them to do it better. So let's think about this lesson language for 1 minute. So when I think about something I want to draw, I sometimes get worried about being able to draw it. Is that sometimes hard for you? Is that hard for you as a writer? But I've learned to look at it part by part, and I can now see the shapes in what I want to draw. For example, if I want to draw a person, I can say, I don't know how to draw that. Or I can say, well, a head is just a circle. Let me put down a circle. Then I can draw a neck as a small rectangle and draw that. Then the body is one bigger rectangle, and so on, and proceed with the demonstration. So that tells your writer step by step, rather than thinking about the whole thing that they want to draw, but rather to think about it as drawing particular shapes that they know how to draw. So this is just one simple lesson, one simple example, how we need to think about the process of engaging writers and not just the product. As we look through our Cerebello texts and strategies that are much more complex, you'll notice again that she always thinks about the process and the steps to get the product better, thinking about that transfer each and every time in every single lesson. This week, we're really focusing on narrative writing and the skills and strategies it takes for our learners over time to really get better at being narrative writers. So a lot of the skills and strategies that they engage in, even in preschool, kindergarten, first grade, a lot of the work is foundational, and a lot of the skills grow in complexity, and therefore the product becomes different over time. So one resource that I find particularly valuable that I have listed as an optional text, but I would highly recommend, is the Writing Pathways, Performance Assessments, and Learning Progressions. So the learning progressions really give us a vision and really show us essentially the expectations for writers over time. And so if writers are at a certain stage or a certain part in this particular progression, they may have skills that are on grade level, they may have skills that are beyond grade level, and they may have skills that are above grade level. And so thinking through this particular resource, which is basically to support you in being able to calibrate your expectations for learners, to be able to set goals for writers. And there's actually another Pathways book that extends on into middle school. So if you teach at the upper grades, you'll be interested in the Writing Pathways that is geared for our 6th to 8th grade learners. Inside this text, you'll notice some open-ended prompts that are repeated throughout each grade level and focus on the genres of opinion writing, informational writing, and narrative writing. And there's also a progression for each one of the genres. There are rubrics to support students and checklists, and there are also grade level examples of particular student work. The structure of the learning progressions for each particular genre discusses overall the pieces, the expectations overall for the genre for each grade level, the expectations for a lead, for transitions within a piece of writing, the endings throughout the text, throughout the writing, the organization or structure of the writing, the elaboration being used in that particular genre, and continues through particular craft that the student should be using at different grade levels, spelling expectations minimally, and minimal punctuation expectations at that grade level. So focusing on a narrative piece of writing, you'll notice that overall, if we think about our preschool friends, that the writer told a story with pictures and some writing. So by the end of preschool, the expectation is that they would have some pictures, maybe 1 or 2 pages, right? And that they are simply telling a story with some type of visual representation, and they might be adding a beginning letter sound, or they might be adding some scribbles, right? Some writing that is representational of the alphabetic principle or letters, right? So at that stage, it's really just sort of telling a story. Then in kindergarten, the writer told, drew, and wrote a whole story. So the story has a beginning, middle, and end. So if you think of our youngest kindergarten writers by the end of the year, really thinking through multiple pages, showing some type of setting through visual representation, and being able to show some type of problem and then some type of solution to that particular problem. First grade writers, the writer wrote about when she did something. Second graders, so you're adding on to this trajectory, the writer wrote about a time when he did something. So if you think about our writers and that trajectory through, you can see that in narrative writing overall, the expectations increase, but essentially there's foundational things that they focus on and then places that they need to add. If we think about the lead, the writer started by drawing or saying something, right? The writer had a page that showed what happened first. The writer tried to make a beginning for a story. So whether they added one day or just alluded to that fact that that was a beginning to the story. Second grade, the writer thought about how to write a good beginning and chose a way to start her story. She chose the action, talk, or setting that would make a good beginning. And you'll notice throughout the trajectory that it becomes more and more complex for our narrative writers. Again, ending, same type of trajectory, organization. On the writer's paper, there was a place for a drawing, a place where she tried to write words. The writer's story had a page for the beginning, a page for the middle, and a page for the end. The writer wrote her story across 3 or more pages. The writer wrote a lot of lines on a page and wrote across a lot of pages. The writer used paragraphs and skipped lines to separate what happened from what happened later. And then finally, one of the most complex areas is how writers elaborate. So in thinking through elaboration, right, the writer indicated who was there, what they did, and how the characters felt. The writer put the picture from his mind onto the page. He had details of pictures and words. The writer tried to bring characters to life with details, talk, and action. So really in second grade, writers are beginning to really think about dialogue, really thinking about verbs showing action, and really thinking about adding those explicit details to make the writing match the illustrations. Again, the writer worked to show what was happening to and in his characters, thinking about actions and maybe that internal thinking from characters. And then the writer added more to the heart of the story. So really thinking about theme beginning in 4th grade and how they do that as a narrative writer. And really did that, brought out the theme through not only actions and dialogue, but also thoughts and feelings. Beginning in 5th grade, the writer developed characters, setting, and plot throughout his story, especially the heart or theme of that story. To do this, they used a blend of description, action, dialogue, and thinking. So, and even noticing some craft in our writers really moving forward. I'm going to begin in 2nd grade. The writer chose strong words that would help readers picture the story. The writer not only told the story, but also wrote in ways that got readers to picture what was happening and brought their story to life. So this particular trajectory in really thinking about the genre really helps us to be able to identify what it is we're looking for writing as we're beginning to teach those strategies. And at the end of the text, you really want to calibrate your own thinking. So this particular text also provides a checklists for students, and one thing I like in particular are the narrative pieces. So in preschool, right, here is some beginning writing where you can notice that there were, it looks like, some characters, and we notice our tadpole friends here for our beginning writers, and it looks like they were swinging on a tree or a branch. And, or maybe not, I could be wrong. It looks like the narration at the bottom is about a sister sleeping. So, but then you'll notice, again, you can use the trajectory across grade levels to really support your thinking and think about those expectations from writers. And again, pieces that extend beyond for our narrative writers in 5th grade and extends beyond each grade level. And then finally, there are expectations that have been written by the authors of this text that really annotate what you're looking for. So the narrative is based on the same topic and story, and then this particular progression allows you to use it as a mentor text for students to be able to illustrate what you're asking from them, and also helps you to be able to set some calibration guidelines for your expectations. So I would highly recommend the Pathways text for you, as not only to be able to assess students, but be able to identify those transferable strategies for particular students. In order to support our students in really knowing what this looks like, we really need to support them as readers, to notice from expert authors these particular craft moves or these strategies, or the way illustrations tell a story, or the way a story is elaborated through picture books and exemplars from other student writing. So a piece of writing can also be a mentor for students, that they can study the craft moves, or a speech, or an article. And so depending on what type of genre and what they're noticing and wondering, we really want to engage our students as readers, and typically through the strategy for us for interactive read-alouds to really help them to be able to notice craft moves, to be able to notice author's intention, and be able to improve their writing through actually studying mentor texts. And so we talked a little bit about, at the beginning of this lecture, about the purpose of a reading notebook. But really, that's the place where we want to support students in being able to notice how many lines are on a page, being able to notice how an author adds details, and being able to engage in those conversations that really support them as readers and writers simultaneously within that reciprocal process. And so this is a reader's notebook of a 6th grade student, which obviously is going to be much more complex than our K-2 learners, who might just be noticing and engaging with author's craft, or noticing visuals by just adding a simple post-it, or flagging with a post-it in a picture book, and then being able to engage with another partner in the classroom, or some type of turn and talk on your rug where students are engaging with a text and really thinking about some of the craft moves or author's purpose or engagement strategies that the author intentionally does to the reader to be able to support them in the writing. And so in this particular notebook, you'll notice that it is set up in different sections. So you'll notice that there's a section for interactive read aloud, there's a section for my own notes, there's a section for different books that they've read and things that they wanted to notice. You'll notice that there's some different strategies that you can provide for readers in being able to use literary elements to be able to support their engagement and their stop and jot so that they can retell at a higher level. And then even just taking some notes and coming up with some basic themes and ideas and writing about how they, taking notes around how they know that so that that can support their response to reading or simply their talk. And so I can't emphasize enough the purpose for talk and really getting your readers and writers to talk to one another about the strategies they're using, or talking to them about the purpose or the theme or how they know, and really flipping back and forth in text to get them to really engage at a much higher level so that they can notice and wonder and inquire at a higher level so that their reading, writing, and talk becomes so much better at the same time. Because without that talk and that higher level of talk, your students can't engage with the page at the level that you would like them to, regardless of they're a kindergarten writer, second grade writer, fourth grade writer, or middle school or high school writer. They can't engage with that unless they talk and rehearse and think through some of their ideas with another person. And so sometimes we want to impact them with graphic organizers and get them to record so many things, but sometimes this is exhausting for them because they've already done all the writing and engagement work in the graphic organizer rather than just taking on simple notes or basically an idea that they can talk to friends about, and then maybe really orally rehearsing or sort of talking to their friends about their idea so that they can be able to flash draft from some basic notes that they've taken. So this can happen through their own seed or choice ideas, or it can happen through their studying of a mentor text. So one idea that I have been really playing with and thinking so deeply about is Tanny McGregor, her book that she just published, really thinking about ink and ideas and really thinking through sketch notes. So what does that really look like for some of our students that really engage, are having difficulty with engagement or aren't engaging, or maybe engage with some type of doodles and drawing, and really thinking through some of the strategies to be able to take notes and really connecting both sides of the brain, if we think about some of that brain-based research, and really pulling together the right and the left side of the brain and thinking of ideas and constructing some visual notes. And so letting our students really respond with pictures as well as with words when they're taking notes. So this is an interesting text that you may also be interested in viewing. So Stacy Shubitz has been doing a great job in her text in really engaging us to really think about our young writers and thinking about really choosing those mentor texts to really engage writers with those powerful craft moves. And so I want to call your attention to one strategy that she really gives students and she really gives us to be able to engage with a mentor text, and really thinking about some of these types of questions that we may internalize as educators or that we may need more of a scaffold for us as we're thinking, if we're new, thinking through some of these particular questions as we're engaging with really selecting a mentor text or thinking about the purpose for a mentor text. And I think if we think through really sort of making this visual for our students, we want to think about creating anchor charts and really creating scaffolds for them so that when they pick up a book and they pick up any picture book after we've really been modeling these strategies, that they can actually engage in some of this work themselves. So what will that anchor chart look like in your classroom? How do you make visual the internal thinking that you've sort of modeled out loud for students as you're engaging with them during your interactive read aloud? How do you make that visual so that it transfers over time? What strategies do you use? You may simply take that particular list that's in this sort of worksheet format, which I'm not a lover of worksheets because I feel like it's more of a compliance rather than a engagement. And so you may have some learners that may need such a detailed structure, or you might have these questions on Post-its or on a ring that students might flip through as they're really doing some partner reading and sort of thinking about these particular questions. You might have this anchor chart in your classroom, really sort of supporting the steps to, reading the picture book, really thinking about what did you like and be specific. So oftentimes our students don't have that vocabulary and the practice to be able to specifically talk about what they liked in a text. So oftentimes, we can read through a text for enjoyment and we sort of say, oh, I like that, or I didn't, but we don't often engage in that oral rehearse or that partner work or that work on our rug or those conversations that really tell us specifically what we liked either about an entire text or a certain section of a text or one line of a text or one page of a text. So we really want to practice this again and again to get them to be specific in noticing what they like. So it can be anything from the illustrations supporting the text. They like the way that the author showed something in the picture but didn't really include it in the writing. So all of those things to support them really reading closely, so those close reading strategies, so they can notice what the author did on purpose. So really alluding to that idea of authors do things on purpose, and so we need to, as readers, notice them and be specific on how we're noticing them. And then really thinking through, did the author do anything that you admired? Did you like the way the author did something? So depending on your grade level, you're going to be noticing things as specific as certain types of font. Did they put things in bold print, to use of punctuation or placement of words on the page, to specifically various chapters through the text, how they connected back in one chapter to the next, right? So the level of complexity in this conversation depends on your grade level, and really what students notice and what you teach them in narrative writing, you're sort of going to be teaching it through your interactive writing. Your interactive read aloud that they're going to transfer to writing. So as you engage with conversations about the text and really those personal connections, you're also going to be thinking about author's purpose and author's intention and why the author wrote this particular book. Why did the author write this? They simply didn't want to just write a story, but why were they impacting you? And then again, did the author do anything that you admire? And again, what was it? What were those craft moves? So how did the author do it? So if they admired it, how did the author do it? And really getting them to name the particular craft moves that the author used And then again, over time, have you seen other authors use these craft moves? So it can be something as simple as speech bubbles. So for our youngest learners, right, did other authors use speech bubbles? Is there another author that used bold print? So that those conversations can take that trajectory to the author used flashbacks, right? So, and then finally, really thinking about, is there something you would like to try as a writer? So as you're really noting and creating anchor charts and noticing the craft moves of specific authors, you really want to be clear and explicit and transfer this information by noting these things, creating those visual anchor charts so students can refer back to them as another teacher in the room when you're done with the conversation, so that it really prompts them to be able to notice what were those craft moves, what did they look like in the text. You might be photocopying that particular section of the text and really under that name or craft move. You might be collecting authors who've tried it in your classroom and really publishing and posting their work so that these craft moves become so explicit and clear to students that they can actually talk about them and try them. And as they're engaging and setting these writing goals for themselves, you want to engage in conversations in your writing conferences where they are going to show it to you. So if they say they're going to try it and they create a particular goal, you want to say to them, so show me where this is in your writing. So they're going to point to a specific page or part, or they're going to talk through it and try it and orally rehearse it, and then they're going to try to flash draft it. And again, you're going to hope that they're not perfect at it when they first try it, but that you can see that trajectory over time. So just because we've taught it or modeled it or done an interactive shared writing together, it doesn't mean that they can do it. So they need to talk about it again and again. They need to see it explicitly before they can actually show and try that. So we know from the lessons that we've read this week in our narrative section of the text that we've read, we know that the craft moves that are highlighted in the text that she provides for us are really dialogue, internal thinking, leads, and endings. So all of our lessons align with the specific focus that Stacey Shubitz has provided for us. And really, she names those craft moves and she illustrates them. So even in the textbook for Clever Jack, which is the first set of lessons that are provided for us, you'll notice that in this particular text, she highlights the pages. She shows us exactly where these craft moves exist so that you can replicate this work in your classroom at various grade levels depending on the needs of your particular students. So I have just gone on YouTube. I found the read aloud in case you don't own this particular text so that you might correspond some of the lessons and the text itself for your future use. Thanks for learning with me.